I was standing alone at Incheon Airport, with empty hands, no ticket, no phone. Through the steady announcements and the messy shuffle of people passing by, I could still hear the silence. Adrian Hall, my husband, left behind after canceling my return ticket and walking away as if I'd never existed. Before he turned his back, he said one thing, so soft it was almost a whisper. "Let's see how you manage without me." It wasn't anger, it wasn't frustration, it was the cold confidence of someone who believed the power was entirely his. To understand why I stayed frozen there, I need to go back a little. I'm Noelle Park, a high school teacher, the type who chooses silence whenever a conflict can be avoided. Adrian used to say he loved that calmness. Later I realized he loved it because it made me easier to control. I didn't see it from the start. But every time he corrected me in front of friends, every time he told me to lower my voice and be polite, every remark about my job not being on the level, to discuss matters with his family. All of it slowly built up a thin layer of discomfort I kept trying to ignore. His family, especially his mother, Eleanor Hall, always cared about appearances. I remember the first dinner I had at their house. She asked what subject I taught. I told her I taught literature. She gave me a polite smile, but her eyes held that weighing look, the kind people use to decide whether you fit the image they want for their son. Later, in the car, Adrian leaned over and said, "My mom prefers someone with a more impressive career." I didn't say anything. I just stared out the window, feeling a small ripple inside, but still believing it was only a difference in perspective. Before this trip, tension had been simmering for a while. Adrian got irritated over small things. I remember the most recent time, when I talked about a student who was struggling, and he told me not to bring troublesome energy home. I didn't answer. I just looked at him for a moment. Adrian hated that look. It made him feel I wasn't as obedient as before. On the way to the airport, the old tension trailed right behind us from the moment we got in the taxi. Adrian didn't say anything. He just scrolled on his phone, the screen's light reflecting off his face like cold glass. I tried to start a conversation a few times, but he cut me off with short lines. "We'll talk later. I'm busy right now." He wasn't busy. He just didn't want to listen. When we got to the check-in area, Adrian deliberately booked seats apart and said he wanted his own space. I didn't object. I usually didn't object to things like that, but it was exactly my silence that made him believe he could keep pushing the line farther. While we waited for our turn, he spoke quietly enough for only me to hear. "Don't say anything that'll embarrass me in front of the staff." His voice was calm, but underneath it was the same control I'd seen too many times to mistake it. I watched him. His collar adjusted to perfection, his fingers tapping lightly on his passport, as if everything in the world always moved the way he wanted. He was used to that feeling, so used to it that even a small disagreement felt like an insult to him. When I brought up what happened the week before, the moment he belittled me in front of his friend, Adrian stopped. He turned to me, his eyes not angry but disappointed with a hint of disdain. "You really want to bring that up here?" His voice was low but sharp. I didn't argue. I just said, "I didn't like the way you spoke to me that day." That was all. Maybe the fact that I dared to speak up made Adrian feel he was losing control. And when someone like him feels their power slipping, they tend to strike where it hurts most just to prove they still can. And this is where everything started to slide. At the boarding gate, Adrian walked back to the service counter and asked them to cancel my ticket. He did it without raising his voice, without a hint of frustration. When the staff asked if he was sure, he simply said, "She won't be traveling with me anymore." I was standing a few steps away, hearing every word. Adrian came back, glanced at me like he was looking at a stranger. "My family already told you," he said as he slipped his passport back into his wallet. "They've always been embarrassed by your ordinary career." That sentence didn't hurt me. It woke me up, and that was the seed of the reversal Adrian never expected was coming. I stood there for a few more seconds after Adrian's last words, as if I needed time to sort through everything that had just happened. But it wasn't shock. It was the clear feeling that something in me had shifted direction. He walked ahead, and I followed a few steps behind. Not because I was clinging to him, but because I needed to move out of that crowded space. The air between us had already thickened long before, and what happened at the boarding gate was only the final point in a long chain of things I'd tried not to face. The whole path to the airport started with something so small it was almost ridiculous. The night before, during dinner with his friend, I said one thing he didn't like. Just one line. He was bragging about his new project, and I simply mentioned that the client had asked for more revisions. Adrian looked at me instantly, the smile on his face still there but his eyes darkening. Later, on the drive home, he told me I didn't know how to pick the right moment to share my opinions. I didn't respond. And this morning, when I got into the taxi, Adrian carried that same irritation with him, letting it slip into every breath between us. On the way to Incheon, he looked out the window most of the time. When I asked a few simple questions like, "Did you bring your passport?" or "What should we do tonight when we get there?" Adrian answered with clipped replies. "Yeah. We'll see." A moment later, he let out a soft, mocking line. "Let's just hope you don't try to act like the smart one today." He didn't say it loudly, but it was enough to put me back in the place he always wanted me to stay. One step lower. Always one step lower. When we reached the check-in area, Adrian stepped up to the counter, handed over our passports, and requested separate seats. He didn't ask me. He didn't look at me. When the staff double-checked, he said, "2 separate seats. She needs space." It sounded like care, but only I knew it was a thin blade. I didn't react. What I felt wasn't hurt. It was the numb recognition of a pattern repeated so many times it had become dull. We had lunch in the food court. I picked a quiet spot. Adrian barely ate, mostly staring at his phone. Every now and then he looked up and said things that made the air even heavier. "Don't talk so loud. Everyone here is polite." Or, "Stop looking around so much. It makes you look insecure." I stayed silent, not because I was scared, but because anything I said seemed to be something he'd already decided the meaning of. The longer I sat across from Adrian, the clearer it became. The thing I tried to avoid seeing. He didn't want a partner. He wanted a backdrop. A quiet, agreeable wife who stayed half a step behind so he could always stand at the center where he believed he belonged. I used to think my calmness was a strength. But to Adrian, it was empty space he could fill with control. The spark that led to the argument wasn't big at all. I only brought up what happened the week before. The night he belittled me in front of his friend, saying, "Teachers don't understand the real pressure of finance work." When I told him it bothered me, Adrian stopped, set his spoon down, and looked at me like I'd committed some serious offense at a crowded table. "You're trying to damage my reputation in front of people, aren't you?" His voice was quiet, but firm. It wasn't a question waiting for an answer, because he'd already decided. Anything I said that didn't align with him was damage. I didn't argue. I just looked at him for a few seconds. And maybe that look was what made him feel his place was unsteady. Not loud, not confrontational, just silence that tested his patience. As we neared the boarding gate, I noticed his steps get faster. He wanted to end the conversation on his terms. And he did. He walked up to the service counter, said my name, and asked them to cancel my ticket. Not a single moment of hesitation. When the staff asked for a reason, Adrian simply said, "She's not traveling with me anymore." His voice was calm, like he was changing the delivery schedule of a package. I stood far enough away that no one would think we were together. Adrian turned back, looked at me one last time, and said the line I knew he'd been holding on to for a long while. "I want to see how you manage without me." Then he walked off. No turning back, no hesitation. I stood there for a moment, then stepped toward the wide hallway. I didn't follow. I didn't call out. I didn't feel the panic Adrian expected. I was looking for a place to sit when I heard an older woman call my name. Her voice was low, a little rough, strangely familiar. When I turned, she was standing there, silver hair pinned neatly, sharp eyes but not cold. She watched me for a few seconds, then let out a long breath as if she'd already predicted what just happened. "You're Noelle, right?" she asked. "I'm Evelyn Hart, mother of Adrian's ex-girlfriend." I froze for a beat. Not because she surprised me, but because of the way she looked at me. No pity, no curiosity, just the gaze of someone who knew exactly what had played out. She continued, her voice calm to the point of being cold. "I know about this. Adrian, he left my daughter behind at the same airport." Each word landed on me like a clean, straight line. Sharp and quiet, no drama, no embellishment, just a truth laid bare, so pointed, Adrian never imagined it would someday surface. And I realized, what just happened wasn't a sudden outburst. It was a habit, a repeated behavior, a pattern from someone who believed his family would always clean up the mess for him. I stood still, not surprised, not confused, just watching everything fall into its proper place. And from here, the real story began. Evelyn didn't rush into the story. She looked at me as if checking whether I was steady enough to hear the rest. And maybe my silence told her what she needed to know. I wasn't the kind of person who collapsed when the truth showed itself. She gave a small nod, then spoke in an even voice, no shaking, no tears. Back then, she began, my daughter was standing right here, right in front of the International Departures Board. She was holding the ticket Adrian handed back to her before he left. She paused for a moment, her eyes fixed on the flow of travelers passing by, and she didn't have a phone either. Just like you now. The airport was wide open, but that sentence tightened the air around us. She didn't need a long story. A few details were enough for me to see it. A young woman, trusting the man she loved, then being left behind like an unclaimed item no one wanted. I asked quietly, what did he say before he left her there? She answered without looking at me, the same thing he said to you. In that moment, everything I'd once tried to explain away about Adrian collapsed into a sharp line. This wasn't anger. This wasn't impulse. It was a pattern, a tactic, a way of proving power by throwing the person beside him into the dark and watching them struggle. She went on, her voice still steady, which somehow made every word sharper. His family blamed my daughter. They said she overreacted. They said she didn't know how to protect their reputation. Then they told me to stay quiet, because it wasn't worth making a scene. I understood instantly. Adrian's family didn't protect him out of love. They protected him for appearance, for the polished, artificial cleanliness they called dignity. And when a family chooses image over truth, they'll wipe away anything to keep their son from ever facing consequences. A few travelers nearby had begun to pick up pieces of the story. Not because we were speaking loudly, but because the air around us had gone still. A woman standing close tugged her suitcase a little nearer, slowing her steps on purpose. A man checking his passport glanced over, then pretended to adjust his backpack strap just so he could listen. Evelyn looked around, then said the line that made everyone, including me, pause for a long beat. He didn't leave you because he was angry. He left you because he knew his family would erase every trace. No one spoke after that. Only the overhead announcement echoed through the terminal, cold and even like the airport's indifferent heartbeat. I felt something in me pull apart. Not sadness, not anger. Just a clarity spreading out like a space that had finally been cleared. A truth so sharp it didn't need emotion to go with it. Evelyn continued. Don't think this ends here. Adrian doesn't abandon someone because of an argument. He does it when he feels he's losing a bit of control. And he always believes his family will fix everything, just like they always have. I nodded. No denial. No defending Adrian the way I used to. The truth she laid in front of me was too sharp to avoid. We stood there for a few more minutes. I had no idea where Adrian had gone. Maybe he thought I'd panic, start searching for him, call his name, beg him to come back. He didn't understand that my silence wasn't weakness, it was a boundary. And once that boundary was crossed, it became a clean cut. A group of passengers walked by, then split to either side when they saw the strange contrast between me and Evelyn. Me standing straight, steady, her quiet and heavy but not broken. The people nearby watched with open curiosity. And then Adrian appeared. He was walking fast, his steps tight, as if he'd just realized he'd gone too far. When he saw me standing with an older woman and a few people looking his way, he hesitated. Just for a beat. But enough to show his surprise. He tried to steady himself right away, straightened his jacket, then walked over with the strained smile I'd seen many times. The one he used when he wanted to take control of the moment. Noelle, why are you standing here? I was looking for you. His voice was soft in that artificial way. I didn't answer. I just looked at him with an expression he wasn't used to. No pleading, no explanations, no effort to smooth things over for him. Just a clear silence that makes the other person take a step back. Adrian glanced at Evelyn, confused that he didn't recognize her. Sorry, and you are? Evelyn didn't respond to his question. She spoke directly, no preface. You still haven't kicked that habit, Adrian. Adrian froze. In that brief moment, I saw his real self. Not the confident man he liked to present, but someone who'd grown up inside the shadow his family built, panicking any time that shadow was exposed to light. I don't know what you're talking about, Adrian said, trying to keep his voice steady. Evelyn looked straight at him. You left my daughter at this very airport, exactly like today, and your family bought our silence so it would all disappear. Not a sound came from the people around us. Adrian opened his mouth, but he didn't get the chance to speak. I cut in, my voice light enough to feel cold. So this wasn't the first time. Just one line. No attack. No accusation. But I saw it hit Adrian like a thin blade. He turned to me, eyes sharp with caution, something I had never seen in him before. Not anger, not aggression, but fear from someone who'd always been in control suddenly being exposed. Noelle, that's not... Evelyn cut in, her voice flat as glass. Don't deny it. I heard your family discuss how to handle it. They said as long as nothing got out, you'd be fine. And do you know what bothered me most? You never apologized to my daughter. The air around us tightened. A passenger set their suitcase down and stayed still, just to keep listening. Adrian stammered. You're misunderstanding. No, I said. She understands perfectly. You're just repeating an old habit. Adrian looked at me, and for the first time he couldn't find a single word to regain control. I looked straight at him. Seems like you thought I'd stay quiet the way the last person did. Evelyn nodded, confirming every word. Your family can cover for you, but you forgot one thing. The people you leave behind, they remember. No one around us looked away. Adrian stood in the middle of that silent circle, seen for the first time exactly as he behaved. Smaller, distorted, nothing like the polished man he tried to present. And that's when I saw it clearly. Adrian wasn't being exposed by me, or by Evelyn. He was being exposed by his own pattern. Repeated so precisely it became the perfect evidence against him. And there was no way for him to take it back now. It took Adrian a few seconds to rearrange his expression. He inhaled, adjusted his collar, then tried to smile. The kind I knew was strained. Noelle, he said in that gentle tone he used whenever he wanted to flip a situation, you're misunderstanding. A mother will always defend her child. There was nothing untrue about that sentence. What was wrong was the way he tried to use it as a shield to cover everything that had just come to light. He said it with forced calm, but his eyes were darting, scanning the people around us, trying to figure out who had heard, who had seen, who was starting to connect the dots. But the people around him weren't looking at him the same way anymore. Something had shifted. No one spoke. Yet the air said everything. They'd seen enough. They'd heard enough. They understood this wasn't a case of a mother defending her child, but a pattern repeating itself. Adrian sensed it. I watched him fumble to rebuild his calm. He stepped half a pace closer to me, trying to pull me away from Evelyn, away from the eyes now fixed on him. Noelle, come here, he said quietly. Don't let people misunderstand us. I didn't move. I just stood straight, hands relaxed, my voice as steady as it had been since the start. I'm not misunderstanding, Adrian. You left me when you felt out of control. That's your habit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't sound angry. I didn't accuse. I simply stated the truth. What I said made Adrian stop completely. Not because he realized he was wrong, but because he realized he no longer held the upper ground. When he couldn't force me into the reaction he expected, anger, panic, tears, begging, his entire system of control fell apart. Evelyn spoke again, her voice so calm it made Adrian's shoulder tense. This isn't the first time he's done this. His mother taught him how to shift blame when he was a kid. As long as the girl stepped back even a little, we were told she was too sensitive, too childish, too emotional. Adrian turned toward her with a sharp edge in his voice. You don't know what's going on between me and Noelle? You think I don't? Evelyn cut him off. Your family covers for you every time, from the day you abandoned my daughter to the lies you told about her being unstable. Everything was about protecting your image. Every word she spoke sliced through the glossy layer Adrian had painted over himself. She wasn't humiliating him. She was reading out the behavioral record of a man who'd grown used to having the path cleared for him. A man nearby froze mid-step. A young woman gripping her suitcase tightened her hold. The eyes around us locked onto Adrian, not out of curiosity but with judgment, clear, unmistakable judgment. Adrian tried to smile, but his lips trembled. Everyone's misunderstanding. This is just a private matter. It's not that serious. I looked at him. Not serious for you. For the people you leave behind, it's a wound. And for your family, it's something to cover. Adrian stiffened at the word cover. He knew exactly what I was hitting. The truth, buried under the image his family worked so hard to protect. Evelyn followed my words, her voice steady and direct. Your mother taught you how to escape trouble by shifting blame onto women. And because of that, you think you never have to face consequences. You assumed Noelle would stay quiet the way my daughter did. Adrian looked around. At least 6 people were staring straight at him. He tried to avert his eyes, but there was no familiar exit this time. No one taking his side, no mother to interrupt, no family to clean up after him, no polished image left to hide behind. He turned back to me, his voice noticeably smaller. "Noelle, let's just go home together." I didn't let him finish. "I'm not going with you." I opened my bag, took out my wallet, and pulled out my card. No shaking, no hesitation. I didn't even look to see how Adrian reacted. I walked toward the nearest service counter. The staff member asked where I wanted to fly. I told her the destination. My voice was calm, every movement deliberate, unhurried, certain. As I signed the payment form, Adrian stepped closer. "Noelle, don't do this. We're just upset." I looked at him. The last look I would ever give someone who once walked beside me. "You didn't leave me because you were angry. You left me because you thought you had the right to." A few people nearby nodded slightly, like they just heard someone finally say the quiet truth out loud. I took the ticket from the staff member and thanked her, my voice steady and clear. When I turned back, Adrian grabbed my hand. Not hard, but with that familiar need to control. "You don't understand how far this could spread," he said. "You're gonna make everything worse." I slipped my hand out of his. "No force, just intention. What spreads won't be because of me. It'll be because of you." Adrian froze. His face went a little pale. He looked around, searching for anyone who might validate that I was being too much, the way he always framed it. But no one met his gaze with sympathy. Everyone could see it clearly. He was clinging to power he no longer had. I stepped back, putting space between us. Adrian stepped forward, desperation creeping into his lowered voice. "Noelle, please, don't do this. I need." I cut him off with the final line. A line I knew would not because it was cruel, but because it was cruel, but because it was true. "I'm just leaving the place you're used to abandoning people in." That sentence stopped Adrian in place. Not because I said it loudly, not because I exposed him, but because the calm in my voice struck directly at what he always avoided: responsibility. He had no angle to twist, no one to blame, no story to hide behind. Evelyn looked at me, her expression softer for the first time. Not pity, not satisfaction, just recognition. That I had walked away at the exact moment her daughter never got the chance to, before his pattern could swallow me the way it swallowed her. Adrian tried to say something, but nothing formed. He just stood there, hands hanging at his sides, eyes unfocused, as he realized the version of himself he clung to was collapsing in front of a crowd. No shouting, no scene, no dramatic outburst, just the bare truth standing right in front of him. I didn't look back again. I didn't need to see whether he followed or called out or tried to justify anything. I already knew one thing. My revenge arc wasn't about hurting him. It was about leaving. Steady, cold, without regret. Adrian didn't lose power when I said the final sentence. He lost power the moment I stopped being afraid. And that exposed the pattern his entire family relied on. They can't protect him forever if the people he hurts stop staying quiet. I walked out of that circle of eyes without turning once. Behind me I heard Evelyn say to someone, "At last, someone who won't let him do it again." That sentence closed the entire chapter of my life with Adrian, clean, clear, sharp. And the next chapter began with the airport's glass doors sliding open in front of me. I walked through the airport's glass doors. But the feeling of freedom didn't come from leaving Incheon. It came from leaving Adrian, from the moment I stepped out of the shadow his family built for him and tried to place over me. After the flight, I went home alone. No one was waiting at the door, but the quiet didn't break me. I set my suitcase down, hung up my coat, turned on the living room light. No tears, no shaking, just one clear thought running in my mind. I chose myself at exactly the right moment. My phone, the one I'd had to leave in my checked luggage, started buzzing non-stop when I turned it on. Missed calls, texts, emails, all from Adrian. All the same familiar script. Explanations, blaming the situation, blaming misunderstandings, and finally trying to pull me back into the silent role he was used to. But none of the messages made me stop to read twice. As for Adrian, I knew he was facing the thing he feared most: being seen. No family beside him to sweep the truth away. No rewritten story to protect the good man image he worked so hard to project. The people who witnessed everything at the airport, those eyes on him, were the one thing he couldn't control. And Adrian had never learned how to take responsibility when there was nowhere left to hide. I didn't need to know what happened to him afterward. I didn't need to hear how he explained it to his family. I didn't need to find out whether they tried to cover for him again. The truth had been exposed in front of the right people, at the right moment. And Adrian lost the one thing he relied on most, the trust of the witnesses. Back in my apartment, I sat down on the wooden chair by the window. Afternoon light slid across the quiet room. I looked at my hands resting calmly on my lap, steady, unshaken. No regret, no anger, no need for comfort. I realized one simple thing. Leaving someone who makes you shrink is the deepest form of freedom. I used to think holding a relationship together was what maturity looked like. But real maturity is knowing when to stop holding on to something that's wearing you down. And sometimes the strongest act isn't fighting back. It's walking away in a silence that forces the other person to face the truth about themselves. I opened the window and let the cool air touch my face. Before, I used to wonder if my silence was a kind of weakness. But that day at Incheon Airport, I saw clearly, silence, when used at the right moment, is what exposes people the most. A man who's been protected by his family for too long will start to believe he has the right to abandon anyone and still be saved. But the day the person he leaves behind stops being quiet, stops holding on, stops chasing after him, the entire system built to shield him begins to crack. I didn't need to get revenge on Adrian. I just needed to step out of the loop he relied on. I stood up, poured myself a glass of water, and took a slow sip. The coolness slid down my throat, leaving a clear feeling behind. I wasn't asking myself why he did what he did. I no longer needed a reason. Some people don't change because they've never had to pay for anything, and it isn't my job to keep paying for them. My phone buzzed again. I turned off the sound and set it face down on the table. I thought of Evelyn, of the way she looked at me when I walked away. Not pride, not sorrow, just the quiet recognition that, for the first time, Adrian had met someone who wouldn't let him repeat the same pattern. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them again, letting everything settle with the rhythm of my own breath. In that moment, I knew I'd ended a chapter, clean, sharp, true. And the next one wouldn't have room for anyone who made me small. I wondered one small thing, light enough not to disturb the calm of the afternoon. How many people out there have met another version of Adrian? Someone who thought he had the right to hurt others without ever facing the cost. That's where the story ends. Thank you for listening until the very last word.